Finally, it's 150 years since the classic children's book Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published, and some of the original artwork is on show at a new exhibition at the British Library. Well, earlier I spoke to Helen Melody, one of the curators who put it all together, and began by asking her why the story still has such a strong appeal.
Well, I think part of the attraction of a story is that it's quite whimsical. So there's lots of things that happen that are quite strange, and the characters are quite unusual and quite eccentric. And I think it's the fact that the book is just so different from anything else. So when it came out, it was a very different type of children's literature. It was much more something that a child would have liked to read, rather than, at the time, children's literature in the 19th century was quite didactic. So it told you how you should behave, it told you what you should do. It said, if you do this, and it's not very good, something bad might happen to you. This was much more kind of, it's a fun story, it's something that you can actually imagine a child might enjoy, and I think it's kind of been picked up by children, and it's the sort of book that you can read when you're 8, or your parents can read to you and you can really love. But then when you're 18 or when you're 80, you still enjoy it because it's quite clever, and it's got loads of things in there, loads of famous quotes and famous characters that they really just stick in your mind. You really remember them. Well,
written by a very clever man, a mathematician, and he plays with logic, doesn't he? Which is perhaps why it appeals to adults as well. So if people come to this exhibition, what can they expect to see that will be of interest?
Well, so there's so much that we could have put out in this exhibition. We could have had twice as many things. So what we decided to do was to focus on a particular narrative. So the story we're telling is that the original story has changed and been adapted and been re-illustrated and been parodied, but it really remains Lewis Carroll's original story, and it's the power, the enduring popularity that we're exploring. So we begin by looking at its creation. We have the original manuscript Alice's Adventures Underground, which Carroll actually illustrated himself.
And was different, wasn't it, to than what was published, because he wrote this one specifically for Alice.
It was. So yes, he wrote for Alice Liddell. He first told her the story in July 1862. They went back after their trip down the river, and she said, please will you write this for me, and that's the manuscript we have. So it's quite easy to see the way that it became the published version, but it crucially doesn't include 2 chapters. It doesn't include Pig and Pepper, which includes the Duchess and the Pig Baby, and it doesn't include A Mad Tea Party, and that has the Hatter and the March Hare, and the Cheshire Cat is in the other chapter as well. So what you see in the book are these characters who are really iconic, and they're not in the manuscript. So I think hopefully people will be quite interested to see the way that the story evolved.
Yeah.
The second section looks at publication. So we have some of Carroll's diaries. Mm-hmm. You can see what he's writing about when he's in the process of having the book made and published. We've got some of the original wood blocks, which were used to set the original text. So hopefully people will really get a sense of the kind of process that was involved in bringing a very, very iconic story from its first outing right through to publication. And the later stages of the exhibition, which are called Alice Reimagined, really looks at the way in which different illustrators have made it their own. So you've got a really wide-ranging amount of work. So people like Arthur Rackham, who is this sort of 20th century iconic children's literature illustrator. Obviously, we couldn't not have Disney, so we've got a Disney edition of the book in. Ralph Steadman, 1960s counterculture. What we're trying to show is really the depth and breadth of the library's collections, which are very rich in this area, but also just how inspiring the story still is and how broadly it can be kind of used as a source of inspiration.
You talk about Lewis Carroll, or Charles Dodgson as his real name was, his diaries. Interesting, his relationship to Alice, and he really loved this little girl, didn't he? And when we view that through 21st century eyes, we might think, well, was that an odd relationship he had? Should that colour our reading of the book, do you think?
I think one thing that you see when you look at the diaries is that this is very much a story told initially for a smaller audience, so for Alice and her sisters. And then later you see the way in which he expanded the story more broadly. So I don't necessarily think that we look too much at Carroll himself in the exhibition, but I think the way in which the book was picked up on by adults and children really shows that obviously when he was writing for children, he kind of managed to do it in such a way that he really connected with children, and I think that was quite clear from the beginning, really.
What's so amazing is it hasn't been out of print in 150 years.
No, it hasn't.
Helen Melody, thanks so much.
Thank you.